live stream. I will go live.
Hi, everybody. I'm Professor Giuliano Marodin from University of South Carolina. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to talk about Lean and Industry 4.0. What's the next operational excellence in research? We're here with a great group of panelists. I'm very excited about this. And first, we're going to have some words from Tor Netland. That's our president of our college. So it's up to you, Tor.
Thanks, Giuliano. And also from me, welcome everybody to this third seminar or webinar organized by POMS College of Operational Excellence. Today, we're going to hear more about Lean and Industry 4.0 and what that can mean for operational excellence research. And we have an absolutely stellar panel of panelists that will be introduced very soon by Giuliano. First, I just wanted to say something about the college. POMS College of Operational Excellence is a special interest forum within the Production Operations Management Society. And here you see the team behind the college right now. It's myself, Eric Olsen, Giuliano, who's here today, and also Matthias Thurer, who's helped organize this webinar. Then we have a set as well of distinguished scholars who help us establish and move forward with our college is Morgan Swink, Rachna Shah, who's here today, John Shook, Peter Ward, and Tyson Browning. So if you want, the top ones are the hands and the below ones are the brains. I want to say something which is very important for us. We are so happy this year. We've got many sponsors, also returning sponsors, and it's definitely good that we can spend some time on that and say thank you to all the sponsors at the different levels, particularly perhaps Shingo Institute, who's our gold sponsor so far. There's space for more logos on this slide, so we will be in touch if you're not contacting us in order to be able to sponsor the college. By that, I'd like to, again, welcome the panel, and I will give you the word again, Giuliano. Thank you.
Thank you, Tor. So we have an amazing panel for this webinar. You guys can Google, the resumes are huge. I'm just going to give a little bit of each one of them so we can cut directly to the chase. So we have Jeff Leiker here, and he's emeritus professor from University of Michigan. He's also president of Leiker Lean Advisors. He has many books, bestseller books about Toyota production system that we know about. We also have Rachna Shah, which is a professor at Carlson School of Management in University of Minnesota, and also a founding president of the College of Operational Excellence, part of our team, and is, of course, very well known for her research in Lean and other topics. So very excited to have her here. We have Daryl Powell, visiting professor at University of Bergamo, professor of practice at the University of Wales, Trinity, St. David, and chief scientist of research and manager at Syntaf with some great new research on Lean and Industry 4.0 that tell you to take a look at. And last but not least, we have the man, the legend, Peter Hines, which is here the former director of the Lean Enterprise Research Center at Cardiff University, well-known researcher and scholar, also a lot of papers and research on the topic. He's also visiting professor at Southeast Technical University and a managing director of the Enterprise Excellence Network. So we start talking about these two topics, right? The Lean and Industry 4.0. Just going to say a little bit of words of those two things and then give the words to our panelists. We know that, large and medium companies nowadays are putting a lot of effort in implementing Lean. That's the standard for operational excellence, how to improve their process. Not going to go into definitions. There is a couple of JOM papers that talk about that, and you can see there was great discussions about that recently. But we know the core is that endless seek for continuous improvement, problem solving, learning, improving operation performance, and then people and leadership are the key to continuous improvement, right? And we have all these principles, practice that help us develop this core. You can define it as a social technical system or a business process improvement program. In other ways, people have defined it, culture and all that, right? In the recent years, we have this development of what was called Industry 4.0, name established in 2014. We talk about all these new technologies that are coming, and they're promising to be the next industrial revolution, right? So the promises are high. These new technologies will allow machine-to-machine interaction, interconnected systems, machine learning, more flexibility, on-time decision-making, and all that. So we know all of this is in the pipeline. Some of the technologies are new, some are not that new, but it's being kind of spread very rapidly. And kind of the optimal solution of this system is kind of a totally automation, right? There's also kind of a retract on that, saying we have, Industry 5.0, which will be, putting back the human side, but then the panelists can get a little bit more into that, right? So that being said, just as my personal interest on that, I'm also organizing a special issue at IJOPM. So if you have research on the topic, please take a look at that special issue that is open. It's about Lean and Industry 4.0 at IJOPM. So that being said, let's start with the questions. We're going to have a broad open question to each one of the panelists first, and then we're going to get to more specific. So question here is, what is your perspective about Lean and Industry 4.0? And then I'll open to the panelists. Jeff, if you can start, and we'll pass along to the next and the next one as it goes.
Thanks, Giuliano. So in the second edition of Toto Way, which came out a couple of years ago, I have a principle 8, and it's about technology, and it says that technology should support the people and the process. So I'm assuming that, number one, you have a reasonably good process to support what we might call a lean process. And I'm assuming that there are still people in the building who need to be supported, and that people are doing the main thinking, problem solving, and improvement. So if you look at Industry 4.0, and most of what's written about it, it gives you the impression that there are no people and processes somehow fix themselves and the machines repair themselves. And it's not happening. I mean, the lights out factory, there are a few cases of it in the world, but by and large, it's not happening. And I don't think it'll happen for decades. So I think we still will need people to design processes, to make them lean, to make them effective, product flowing. I think that people will need to then fix the problems that they can't anticipate will occur through problem solving, and we'll be doing the thinking. So the question for me is, how can these new technologies with artificial intelligence and sensors, how can they provide useful information in the right amount at the right time to support people and their problem solving?
That's great. Rachna?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Welcome to the panel. Jeff, that was a great start. I would concur with the idea that in any technology, especially when you look at it from lean perspective, does not mean that you're going to eliminate people from it. And I don't think that is the perspective of Industry 4.0, although it seems sometimes that is where we are heading to, but I don't think that should be the underlying focus. I'll speak a little bit about where Lean and Industry 4.0 is in the academic research. And there we see, actually Torbjörn Netland and one of his students and I have a very extensive lit review. And in that, we're looking at all the lean research that has been published since the book The Machine That Changed the World was published. And what we find is that the proportion of lean in the most recent years is not that large. When you look at it either from the perspective of published OM research or published lean research. So the proportion of Industry 4.0 is not that very large. What we see is that the growth rate of Industry 4.0 within the lean research is rapidly growing. That means there is great interest in the topic. What we also see is that all these publications, meaning where the growth is coming from, is from not our mainstream journals. You do not see so much in JOM, POM, management science, MSOM, decision science, and so on. So what does that tell us? That there is great interest in the topic from a population, whether it is practitioner or academics, but there is a gap in the way we can ask some of the interesting questions. And so we can talk about the questions that will come maybe in future, but that's where I'd like to stop.
Great, thank you very much, Rachna. So Darrow, can you give your perspective on Lean and Industry 4.0, please?
Absolutely, Giuliano. Thank you. Hi, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks also to the POMS College of Operational Excellence for putting this together. I think it's a lot of fun to gather here today and talk about Lean and Industry 4, which is at least an important part of my working life and social life, unfortunately. But yeah, I think my perspective on Lean and Industry 4 is very much being guided by my experience. So for the past near 20 years, I've been studying and guiding lean transformations, both in my homeland in England and Wales, and also more recently in Norway and Europe. And I think somewhere along the lines, digitalization came into the scene. Of course, my PhD originally, about 12 years ago, was looking at the contradiction and the complementarity of lean and IT, namely lean and ERP systems, which kind of lays a foundation for Lean and Industry 4 in a way. And I think I heard somewhere along the line that actually Industry 4 was brought to bear because Germany couldn't get lean to work in its factories. So I'm not sure how much of that is true, but I think when we look at the vision for the factory of the future, having place for only one man and a dog, and the dog's job is to stop the man from touching the machines, and the man is there to feed the dog. I think had we been lean from the start, I don't think neither the man or the dog would be in that position. No, I think there's a lot to be said about what I call lean first and then digitalize, not necessarily lean first and Industry 4, but we can talk a little more about that later. Just to fill in a little bit here, I mean, in Norway right now, we have some very exciting projects between SINTEF and NTNU looking at lean digital and its many paradoxes, both for production planning, for supply chain management, and for data availability optimization of machines. And we have several big EU projects as well at the moment, more in the field of zero defect manufacturing, looking at how we can use artificial intelligence, for example, to monitor and detect and even prevent quality defects from occurring. So it's certainly an integration somewhere along the line, but I think it's going to be fun to discuss it today on this webinar. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. So Peter, can you give me your perspective on Lean and Industry 4.0, please?
Yes, thanks very much, Giuliano, and welcome to everyone to the panel, and very nice to be here. I suppose my background coming into this, probably like most of the people on the panel, is coming from a lean background, lean perspective, having researched and worked in this space for just over 30 years now. And I started to do work on the integration with Industry 4.0 round about the same time I was doing increasing work on looking at what we call the people value stream, the sort of people flow in organizations. And I suppose I see this as a sort of three working together. We've got the traditional lean, which I think still in industry is still more seen as sort of tools and processes and process management. The people side, which I think is still not well understood, certainly in some parts of industry. And thirdly is this sort of technology side of things. And the thing is, how do you bring these together? So I think my perspective, as I see, it's almost like a broken bridge. You've got the three elements working together. You've got the technology people, engineering, ICT type people, maybe with some of the Industry 4.0. You've got maybe the ops people doing the lean stuff, and maybe the HR people doing the people stuff. And I think for me, the issue is that we haven't quite brought these together. And probably if you see it as a three parts of a bridge and lean in the middle, you could probably see the people part and the technical part is the bit that's furthest away, both in terms of function, but also in terms of mindset and so forth. So for me, the real challenge here and some of the research that we're doing is actually how do you bring those together, those three elements, and how do you actually get something that works, that sustains, that actually provides benefit for the organization and for the employee as well. So really it's how do you bring those things together? So more recently, we've been doing research, case study research, where you've got very advanced companies doing this. We've also done some research, global academics, and currently doing research survey work looking at this in industry. Some of you may have taken part in that. So if you did, thank you very much. So I'll share a few of those results from some of those as we go through the session.
Great. Thank you, Peter. So let's go into our first more specific question. Just for people that are watching, you have a poll happening there, two questions that we're going to take a look at that you can answer as we go. So what problems, difficulties companies are facing or will face when working to bring Lean and Industry 4.0 together? Jeff, can you give me your perspective there?
Well, in the, again, going back to the Toyota Way second edition, in that chapter I mentioned, I use an example of Denso, which is Toyota's largest supplier, and they practice their version of the Toyota production system. And they've been exploring Internet of Things technologies. And one plant in particular in Michigan, I talk about in Battle Creek, Michigan, where they use that as a kind of a test bed. And the person who was running it at the time, Rachna, was convinced that Denso was way behind other companies, particularly Western companies, in adopting digitalization. So he went to vendors of this technology and said, show me your best practice cases. And then, as any good person in the Toyota Way would do, he went and saw at the Gemba firsthand. And people, leaders in Toyota and their suppliers tend to be very skilled at observing and finding out what's really happening. And one after another, he found a big gap between what was on the computer displays and what was happening on the shop floor, to the extent that in one case, the OEE numbers were way off, and the people on the floor said, well, we ignore that. Those numbers are always wrong. So they started referring to it in Denso as IoT wallpaper. It looks nice, but it doesn't do anything. So he was determined not to let that happen in Denso. So one of the things he did, and it speaks to Peter's point about this gap, is he created an internal team that included digital IoT, big data people that he hired from outside, and then quality managers from inside who knew the shop floor and understood the problems. And they decided, let's just pick real problems one by one, and then find the technologies that can help us to solve the problems. So for example, one case, it was a fan in a big heat treat oven, and the fan would break and it would shut down the line and cost tens of thousands of dollars. And the putting a sensor on the motor of the fan, they could actually detect in advance that it was going to break down before the maintenance people realized it. And then he realized the maintenance people weren't very good at problem solving once they saw that. So he had to reteach them problem solving. And the result was that they virtually stopped any downtime because of these fans. And then they moved on to other applications. But what they did was had the cross-functional team working problem by problem and pulling the technology to the problem instead of pushing the technology everywhere. And the result, and then before long, they were being benchmarked as a best practice case. And they would have people from these companies that they're benchmarking saying, wow, you actually have real applications that are working. We haven't gotten there yet. So the problem is really just making it work to solve real problems, which does involve this integration of lean and people and technology, as Peter said.
Okay, great.
I'd like to add something to that just to kind of highlight one point. So basically, it is use of technology when it enhances value in the workplace. So basically, technology should be pulled when it would increase the value of the work that we are doing or in the work we are doing. Is that the basic argument we are making? And someone else can respond. It just kind of sees that we come back to the idea of value proposition.
Great, thank you, Rachna. So Dara will also give you that question. What problem difficulties companies will face and are facing in complement to Jeff?
Absolutely. Thanks, Giuliano. And thanks, Rachna and Jeffrey. I think I resonate with the problems you're describing there. And I think actually the question in itself is a little bit of a problem. I think if you're asking what sort of problems companies are going to encounter when they're implementing lean and or industry 4, I think the answer is a wide and vast amount of problems. And I think for this, we need to go back and realize and maybe remember that the lean pivot is not about implementing solutions. It's about really discovering and understanding the problems. And Jeff, you touched on it there about the relearning to solve the problems. So I think we have an article forthcoming in IGOPM where we've been working together with Henrik Solby and Paul Cochran from Denmark and Ireland respectively, where we've been working for many years theorizing towards an integrated theory between lean and action learning. And I think the action learning being a recognized theoretical perspective of solving problems with the problem as the core, not the solution, and actually understanding the problem from a lack of knowledge perspective, and actually discovering what we need to learn to solve these problems rather than just implementing solutions because they look nice off the shelf. I think we're going to cause ourselves several problems. And I think, of course, in action learning, we make the distinction between puzzles and problems. And I think attacking a lean implementation or an industry 4 implementation as a technical puzzle, which can be just implemented, it's rather bizarre because every company is different. It has its different situations, its different inputs and outputs. And particularly the transdisciplinarity of the problem causes it to be a more complex problem. I think, Peter, you were in a little bit about these different silos, and I think speaking from experience, when I started 8 years ago working in Kongsberg Maritime in Norway, responsible for designing, developing, and deploying a lean program in and across the subsea division, we started very much focusing in the production department. And of course, I just came out of university with a PhD in lean, the master's in lean from Swansea already, and I felt a bit of an expert. I knew exactly what to do, and I think I treated that lean implementation as a technical puzzle. It was easy. We just put the pieces together and we'll have a lean program up and running. And I think looking at the input there from Peter's comment earlier, having involved supply chain, engineering, product development, sales, when you look at the organizational perspective of what lean should actually be about, not just running a factory, but managing an entire organization, everybody has different opinions, everybody has different knowledge, but we have to attack it from the problem, not the statements of knowledge. Peter.
Thank you. I just interesting point here. Sometimes we can sit in our universities and we can think of the problems, and it's very easy to come up with all the different science and what we think the problem is. I just wanted to share some early results from the industry survey. So we have about 550 results in, and initial view of that is 4 clusters of problems have been. So this is not future problems. These are problems actually today. So one is the cost. A lot of this new stuff is very expensive. So one is cost. All the others are around people and change management. So one cluster is around change management, culture change, and engagement. Another one is around leadership and getting the buy-in of senior leaders to want to do this. And the last one is around shortages of skills and people and upskilling. So certainly in the case study organization we're working with, their biggest problem in the rollout of this across many factories is the very small number of people they've got with knowledge of the technology and the lean side working together. So that's really speaking from industry of the real things that people are struggling with just now.
Exactly. No, I say thanks, Peter. I see there's a comment from Evelina Edmondson here. It says, in my honest opinion, you cannot implement lean, and I completely agree with you there. I think that's something we've learned over the years. And when we got together the author team for the Lean Sensei, that's when we really started to think about this lean pivot that I described earlier, where it's not a case of implementing lean as a solution, a set of tools and techniques which you can just push into an organization, just like people are attacking Industry 4 in some respects. But it's a means of creating the conditions for continuous improvement and learning, and through this problem discovery and problem solving journey, then, if you like.
That's great. Thank you, Daryl, and everybody, Peter as well. Let's go to the next question. So we're all have a strong background in lean, right? And we're coming saying, Industry 4.0 has to help us to improve processes and learning and the value, right, for the customer. And then my next question is kind of try to be a little bit more critical about what we think, right? Saying that, lean always advocates for continuous improvement, bottom-up problem solving. Is there any kind of barriers or problem or difficulties that the lean community can consider when these new technologies arrive? Meaning that if we're trying to solve small problems, maybe there is a bigger solution that will actually be better than the small problem solvings that we're doing every day. So that question, I can start with Rachna if you would like to give you your perspective there.
So I'd like to paraphrase the question as, is it the set of technologies that you are thinking about, is it the small problem solving or the larger problem solving, if I understand it correctly? So there might be a more optimal solution or larger solution. Yeah. So in some sense, we need to kind of go back and think through what is so different about Industry 4.0 from earlier technologies. And what can we learn from the implementation of those technologies, whether it was shop floor automation in small or big ways, whether it was robotics, which is part of the Industry 4.0. So if we think about these different types of, earlier technologies versus now newer technologies, I think we might be able to glean some interesting parallels between them. The point that is being made on the chat from our YouTube audience is basically that. What is the role of technology in helping lean improve or achieve our gains? So I think Evelina makes the point, you cannot implement lean, but you can create conditions which will allow lean culture and mindset to naturally emerge. So I think from an academic perspective, what is the role of these technologies? And I'll go back to the value proposition again, in bringing out the value by solving the problems, whether they are smaller or larger. And I think the technologies that we use ought to align or fit the scale of problem that we are addressing.
Thanks, Rachna. Yeah, so Jeff, I'm going to give you that question now. Is that mindset of problem solving maybe sometimes not enable us to see other improvements or technologies that might be available?
Or actually, does it intensify the lack of problem solving? When I say does it, I mean, does Industry 4.0 intensify this lack of problem solving or people aspect?
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
I guess I think it can go both ways. So if you look at Daryl mentioned the sensei. If you look at within Toyota, the people who are sensei have been at TPS for 20 to 30 years. Some of them were students of Giuliano, and they're sort of fundamentalists within TPS. And their policy was that they would set a big challenge, and their rule was no technology, no capital investment. So start out just doing what you can with what you've got. And there's still an organization in the United States called TSSC, the Toyota Production System Support Center. And they're a subsidiary, not-for-profit subsidiary of Toyota, and they work with many different types of organizations. And they start with a model line, and that's their policy, is no new technology. And they almost never get less than 100% productivity improvement. And they have gotten as much as over 1,000% productivity improvement without robots and without capital investment. What shows what you can do if you really think and try and learn and take out waste and solve basic problems, often with manual work. They're often working with manual work. So I think there's a good reason to want to do that. Number one, because it's relatively easy to buy something, and it's harder to improve what you already have. So once you let people say, "Yeah, we'll buy a robot," they stop thinking, and they're waiting for the robot to arrive. And there's two pillars of Toyota. We often talk about just-in-time, Kanban, and all that, but there's the Judoka pillar, which is stopping when there's a problem and then solving the problem. So the whole purpose of Andon is to surface problems and make clear what the problems are. So you can do that fairly easily if the person just pulls a cord, or if you build in sensors. And Toyota's been doing that since they designed a loom back 100 years ago. They've had sensors of various kinds to stop the process automatically, and then people have to solve the problems. So we're trying to teach that idea that you have to figure out what the problems are, find ways to sense them quickly and easily, and then very quickly address the problem. And a lot of the new technologies get in the way of that, particularly if you assume that artificial intelligence is doing the thinking. On the other hand, if you look just at Toyota, there are central groups that deal with information technology. And also a key that's often missing is production engineering. And they have thousands of people who are doing advanced work in actually designing machines and designing setting up the factories. And they're highly skilled, and they're well trained in TPS as well. And when you talk about the big changes, the big problems, that usually comes from production engineering. They have offices in the US and Europe, but the main center is in Japan. So if they're not, when they completely redesign how painting is done, or how plastic injection molding is done, or how welding is done, that's not going to happen in the factory based on sensing a problem and fixing a problem, one by one. And that's also true with these advanced IT technologies, which have to come from someplace, and they're not going to naturally come from the shop floor. So in that sense, there's a limit to what we often do with Lean, which is focused on the front line and focused on fixing individual problems. On the other hand, one thing I want to point out is that, and I do in the Toyota way, is that when we talk about big change, like, for example, at one point, Toyota had completely redesigned their welding processes to have very quick changeover welding, so they can produce different models of cars one by one. And there's virtually no change over time. And they called it a global body line. And they designed that in Japan, but they first used one pilot plant and got it to work. Then they would pick a few plants and they would send the experts out, but they left it up to the managers to figure out how to deploy the technology. And there are problems like there was no room to bring in the new technology. You have to start someplace. and they wanted to bring in the new technology without losing a single car of production. So on the fly change. And
Thanks,
that,
Jeff.
let me
yeah.
just finish this statement.
Okay.
So what you actually see is that they are actually making small changes every day over a year, and the result is a revolutionary change in the welding shop. So even big changes require breaking down the problem into a lot of small steps, and what you're doing is continuous improvement with a goal of a very big outcome.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. Yeah, so even the big technology, will not solve all your problems as people expect, right? And then you have to solve the little problems with the big technology will bring. That's a great point. So we have our results from the poll. I'm very happy that we don't have unanimous answers, so that's a good. The question is done right. So we ask you guys, which of the following statements you agree? Lean first, then Industry 4.0. We had 50% of people saying that. Lean and Industry 4.0 in parallel. We have 41% of people saying that. Industry 4.0 first, then Lean. We have 4% of people saying that. Both are buzz, do something else, 3% of the people there. I think, Tor, you were the one that voted for that one, last one. So that being said, it's a good intro to our next question, and after that one, we're going to take a question from the people that are listening. So there is this thing, Lean first, then Industry 4.0, or they're in parallel. Is there any natural sequence of approaching a process from Lean and Industry 4.0 perspective? So Peter, can you give me your perspective there?
This one is a little bit, how long is a piece of string? The answer historically probably is that most organizations have done Lean before Industry 4.0, just because of the timescales that are involved. I think on balance, I would say that probably Lean first for the sort of suggestions that Jeff has made in terms of not automating the waste and this sort of thing. But then there's a few reasons why that might not be the best case. So one of which is going back to the problems that we have in industry of leadership and engaging people in some of the technologies. It actually might be that we want to set up, say, a sandpit organization where we might set up a little lab. So for instance, ST Microelectronics has a very nice lab in its French site near Marseille, where basically anyone can go and have a go. You can try out 3D printing. You can do various sort of playing with technology, which gets people used to the technology and so forth. So there may be reasons for there. There could be other reasons. For instance, things like technology like cloud, for instance, we're probably all using without really realizing that we're using a technology there. So actually there may be a reason why we're actually doing some of these things without really realizing it. So I suppose on balance, it probably is right to think about Lean first, but there may be certain influences. So for instance, if the power base is in engineering in the business, pushing Lean on it first may not work very well. So pragmatically, we might need to go with the flow a little bit. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Daryl, you want to get your perspective there?
Yeah, sure, Giuliano. Thanks, Peter. It's of course I'm a very strong advocate of Lean first, then digitalize. Maybe not Lean first and Industry 4, given that Industry 4 is maybe more of a marketing buzzword nowadays for selling technological solutions. But I think going back to Evelina's comment earlier, I mean, it's not about implementing Lean, it's about creating the conditions which guide the culture development. I think definitely we need to start there. If we don't have the conditions for Lean to work, then I really don't think technology is going to help so much. I mean, for the last since 2017, I think we've written about 20 different articles on what we call it digital Lean manufacturing. Others might call it Lean Industry 4. But we've certainly seen that digitalization enhances Lean practices from the very tool-based implementation perspective, which of course it's not lean really, Peter. So I think when we say many companies have started with lean and then moved to Industry 4, I think to use Bob Emiliani's terminology, they started with fake lean and then gone over to Industry 4 perhaps. But we also see that lean thinking actually paves the way for successful digital transformation. And I think I saw a scary fact, call it a fact, it's from a consultant webpage, so I'm not sure how much a fact it is. But it said that the average organization, I guess it's a large organization, will waste $5.5 million on failed digital transformation the next years. And that's quite a significant amount of cash. I mean, back to your discussion about the sensei, Jeffrey. I think the idea that we should use our brains and not our money, I think that's a much more important place to start and understand, rather than throwing money into the technology just because it's I mean, technology is sexy, right? It's all the bells and whistles, but we need to go back to the basics and really understand what problems are we trying to address, rather than create new problems. So I think having that understanding and that having the thinking right first. So of course, lean, I mean, we say many of these Toyota experts, Toyota Sensei, they say TPS, Toyota Production System, should more likely stand for the Thinking People System. If we have created the Thinking People System, then it becomes much more sensible to adopt technology to help us become even more advanced. So it's this distinction between small improvements, Kaizen, and then the large leaps, embracing and engaging with technology. And I think traditionally Toyota have been very portrayed as very slow adopters of technology, but at the same time, I mean, they were using AGVs back in 1984 when I was still wearing diapers. They were introducing electronic Kanban in 1990. So these are terms we're using in Industry 4 today. In 2023, were being used in Toyota before our time, some of us. So it's lean first, then digitalize all the way, Giuliano.
Great. That's a great perspective, Darren, in terms of if you do a good job with lean, you know where to put the technology and you know where the technology is going to make sense and then give you the benefit, right? If you don't do your homework, maybe you're going to put the technology to use that is not efficient or doesn't give your money back, right?
And then I think the sandbox idea that Peter had is also a very good idea. I mean, that's what the R&D departments should be doing all the time for the production development. But if you have that thought process to guide you in the right direction first before being attracted to all of the nice, sexy new technology, I think it makes much more sense.
Great. Rachna, you can give a comment there, then I'll give it to Jeff.
Oh, actually, I think Jeff's hand was up first, so I'll let.
Well, just a quick point is that at Denso, once they had some use cases that worked and they had proven the value, then they quickly discovered that they didn't have the infrastructure. The internet wasn't fast enough. Wireless wasn't fast enough. So they started working on that. And that was an issue that can be done in parallel with whatever you're doing with lean. And, figuring out what AI language you're going to use. There's a lot of sort of infrastructure stuff that IT could be working on that will be useful regardless of exactly how you deploy these technologies.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. There's a comment from Tiago Cunha. Very good comment, Daryl. So thumbs up for you.
Thank you, Tiago.
Rachna.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say Tiago's earlier comment on, if the technologies are being used only to create a lot of data and share data, that may not be that useful. If your system and processes are broken and you're just implementing technologies, obviously we know that does not work. So in some sort of Daryl support, lean first, technology later might be the sequence for many of the applications, but then there are situations like cloud or the ones that Jeff has mentioned that might be useful, that where we can do them in parallel.
Great. So now we have a question from Professor Melanie Despese from Sweden that I'm going to open and see who wants to answer that. Do you see potential trade-offs between lean and the need for more resilient production system? If so, how to deal with them? We sometimes see the process optimization lead to highly efficient system, but it also reduces flexibility, thus creating vulnerability. So
I can start actually, and
Okay.
then open it up. So this idea about trade-offs between lean and need for more resilient production systems, it has been in the news more so in COVID times, but before that also, there were a lot of conversations and discussions, and I would say arguments about trade-offs between lean and something else. I think if we go back to the basics and what sort of Daryl was talking about, the thinking system, I would augment it by saying it is thinking and learning systems. And so if you can keep the thinking and learning in as part of lean, it really works to kind of take into account any of the issues that we talk about. So let me give you an example. And unfortunately, many of these examples come from Toyota being the exemplar of, of lean. So one of the very seminal articles, the DNA of the Toyota production system kind of lists this. And we know from our work with Toyota, most of us have come across this idea that Toyota will have inventory of the same components at different places in their production system. Well, that's not efficient necessarily, but why is that? The reason is because, the cause for failure may be different at receiving end, meaning where the raw material is coming in versus on the production line versus somewhere else. So what does that tell us about this lean and more resilient system need? Lean should be aligned with external conditions in the market. When you have a lot of instability, variability in demand, you cannot have an optimized efficient system. And that's kind of where I want to leave it at. The thinking, just kind of implementing tools, making it efficient without realizing, without learning about, when is this extra inventory needed? Or when do we need to have local inefficiencies to have global efficiencies? I think that is the argument. And a great case example for that would be Zara, which is a very efficient system, extremely optimized, not in the optimized sense, but in the global optimized sense. And that's why they can get to market new products within 2 weeks anywhere else in the world, right? So I think those are the examples I would start with, and I'll open the floor to others.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachna. Jeff, you want to comment?
Yeah, and I agree with what Rajna said, but I think the bigger problem is that the Toyota production system is a system, and it includes just in time, and it includes built-in quality, stopping as a problem. It includes people who are thinking. It includes integration with suppliers and treating suppliers as partners. And when you have all these working together, then you get this adaptable, resilient learning organization. But when you just take a piece, like just in time, and just implement some sort of policy on inventory, and I remember, I won't mention names, but somebody saying that the acid test of lean is inventory turns. And then some companies I was working with a policy would come down from the top that we are going to reduce our inventory turns to this number or increase our inventory turns to this number. That was a crazy policy because the company was nowhere near prepared to work with that little amount of inventory. And they were shutting down things all over the place. But that was what happens when you take a simplistic policy and deploy it everywhere, and you don't have the whole system working. So it's really with the whole system working that Toyota ends up being very resilient and responsive to all sorts of crises, like the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster, and goes on and on.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you. I would add that lean itself is a resilient system. I think it's our misconceptions and misunderstandings, just as Jeff says, implementing small pieces of a lean program, which you can then come back to and blame later when you run out of stock. I think that's misunderstanding of what lean is all about. And going back to this lean as an education and learning system, I think it's naturally a very resilient system. I think one of the comments we had in the chat was asking the comparison with agile manufacturing, and I think lean and agile are both beginning to be very old, worn out buzzwords themselves from the 1990s. But I think agile, it's more what Industry 4 is aiming at, I believe, is to be agile, making these high volumes of high variety products with automation and technical centric production systems. But I think still it's an agile system as such is not so resilient if we don't have this learning capability built into the organization. Because things will come up, pop up, problems will pop up, and it's how you address those problems using the people doing the work, which is making the resilience a lot of the time.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, we have a comment here from Melanie again saying that lean plus resilience equal learn. So I think that was a good one, and saying thanks, Rachna, for that perspective. We have another question here from Ben Hosius that's asking about the redeployment of capacity when you do these improvements, right? Either an improvement with lean, you're solving problem, being more productive, and you don't need as many people as you needed before, and if you're implementing Industry 4.0, if you're automating something, you also have this people that you're freeing, that labor force, right? And how do companies still show respect for their labor force and not get harmed from these? And also open question here, maybe for you guys to tackle. I'll let someone else, Daryl, since we're ready. Just talk. So
I'm going to have a go.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good question, and I'm not sure there's a lot of research been done into this, but not quite Industry 4.0, but if we think of all the tech firms out there that have just been letting go huge numbers of people, the answer is badly, probably. They don't really manage this well, and hence they don't create the respect for people, and hence as a result they probably don't get the type of culture that we're all looking for. So I guess that's what I'm seeing with some of these certainly tech firms doing these sort of things.
The interesting about Toyota is that they have had a policy going back to when they had a strike and layoffs in the 1940s. They've had a general policy of effectively lifetime employment. It's not really lifetime employment, but effectively. And because every place in the company, including all the manufacturing plants, know that, then, as I would say, failure is not an option. I mean, failure to keep people employed is not an option. So that has led to adaptation. You know, when you have this constraint, you have to figure out creative solutions. And there's lots of different creative solutions. Some of them are standard. So a standard solution is that they tip the standard in Toyota in a manufacturing plant is that 20% of your people will be what they call the volunteer workforce or temporary labor. And they use temporary firms, and they have long-standing partnerships with a temporary firm that supplies personnel and employs these people. So in a sense, that firm is responsible for re-employing them. But there's been arguments that's not respectful to the 20%. But what happens is the 80% then are buffered from layoffs. So naturally, there are cases where you have to add more people when demand goes up, even if it's short term. And you know it's short term, like when you introduce a new model, and they know the demand's going to go down. So if they don't lay off people, they just keep on adding and adding and adding. So they have to have some way of protecting the 80%. And by having the 20%, they can then automatically go down by 20% without laying off any of those people. They also have usually work 2 shifts instead of 3. So they have the opportunity of adding overtime instead of hiring new people when they know that they have a pretty good idea that this bump is temporary. And there's just a whole set of policies that allow them to shrink and grow without, and still protecting the core of people who they consider being long-term employed. And that kind of thoughtfulness, as what Peter mentioned, that kind of thoughtfulness I'm not seeing. in a lot of companies who seem to think that people are just disposable and replaceable, and one person is as good as another. So you overdo it because you anticipate growing demand, and they say, "Whoops, made a mistake." So I have to say, then you hire 20,000 people, and then you make a mistake and say, "Oh, better let 20,000 people go." You get this huge volatility. It's really just a lack, I think, of thoughtfulness and planning, and serious commitment to long-term employment.
Great, thank you, Jeff. So now I have
I'd like to add one little bit, Giuliano.
Sure, go.
Jim Womack said something once which stuck with me, and it was how do you measure the success of your lean transformation? And he says it's successful if you can solve more customer problems with less resources. And I think the emphasis is in the more, not the less. So if we're eliminating waste and creating more capacity in production, this is where the whole lean system comes together. The onus then becomes on the product development and the engineering to actually solve more customer problems with the capacity we create. So make more work. So seeing lean as a growth strategy, I think, is maybe an important perspective to take on board there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Darryl, for that. I have another question more related to research. What we don't know about lean and Industry 4.0 so far that might become future research questions. So I'll open that to Rachna.
So, I would start from the very basics. What is different about Industry 4.0 that we have not seen with earlier technologies? What can we learn from earlier technologies that can apply to Industry 4.0? So that's a huge sort of area that is preventing us from publishing, because if Industry 4.0 is an advanced form of earlier technologies, then the same lessons apply. So what does that mean? If we are going to examine Industry 4.0 questions in the context of lean, the social aspect will become more and more critical. The thinking and learning aspect, how do we demonstrate technologies that impact thinking and learning are the ones that will lead to long-term success. So I think those are the type of questions that are sort of missing from the literature today, but the bottom line remains that why would we expect Industry 4.0 to be significantly different from earlier technologies?
Peter, if you want to add to that.
Yes, thank you. Well, this topic was actually a subject of some research that we did, as I mentioned earlier. We surveyed the top 300 academics globally on this subject in terms of citations, and what we found, based on the feedback, was there were a lot of gaps out there. Mm-hmm. And what we saw was that there's lean literature, there's Industry 4.0 literature. And as Rachna said, rapidly a number of papers bringing the two together. What we saw in terms of a lot of the research was there was a lot of literature-based papers. What's in the literature. There are a number of surveys, particularly on single countries, looking at how is this happening in one country or another. But I think a lot of things that were required were on a practical level. How do you actually do this? How do you create a framework for this? What are the frameworks that companies do? How would you do this on a multi-site level? What were the enablers? What were the barriers that were required? How do you create a roadmap for this? How do you measure the maturity? How do we understand the human side, which obviously you mentioned in your introduction, Giuliano, the Industry 5.0, which was sort of one attempt to maybe come back to some of the human factors, the resilience that we mentioned earlier. How does this link with resilience? How does it work in the supply chain and sustainability? Another important research area was contingency. Is this the same in developing countries? Is this developed countries? Is this the same in automotive or food or construction or large companies and small companies? And I think what was particularly lacking that we found in that was really good, in-depth, maybe even longitudinal research cases. So the work that was done was a little bit theoretical or literature-based, but really, a depth of of empirical case studies was really missing. So really, there were a lot of gaps that we saw, because as Rachna said, this is probably only the last 2 or 3 years that this literature has really started to evolve in a rapid way. So lots of opportunity for those of you from the academic community to look at that. And if anyone's interested, I guess through POMS, I can send you a copy of that paper which identifies those gaps, if that's useful for you.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that was also why we started this special issue, and we're calling for papers and more in-depth, description and analysis of this relationship. So good that we're aligned that without doing all the research that you guys did, but that was great that aligned. So yeah, have the special issue open as well. So one question here, I'll direct to Daryl. What specific technologies like IoT, AI, drones, adaptive manufacturing, or others can potentially enhance or harm the production flow, workers, or improve processes through lean? So can you give me a little bit more your experience there?
Thanks, Giuliano. And this is a great question. This is the core of the business we're working with here at Syntef in the digital production team. Actually, and what I thought I'd do is draw on this thinking people system, and if we don't have a thinking people system, we don't have lean in place first, what's the other option? And I think relying too much on technology could create the lazy people system. So what I've done here is I've called in a co-author of mine called ChatGPT. I mean, this is huge at the moment, right? It's this popular experiment. Those of you who haven't heard of ChatGPT, please get with the times. I mean, even as lean people, we have to be in this movement. So I asked this question to ChatGPT, and I'm going to provide a little commentary on the response, okay? So ChatGPT said, there are several technologies that have the potential to enhance or harm the production flow, workers, or improvement processes through lean principles. Here are a few examples. So a great start. This sounds like a very well-educated consultant, ChatGPT. Internet of Things technology has potential to greatly enhance the production flow by providing real-time data and insight into every aspect of the production process. And this is where I start to wonder. And I think, okay, Internet of Things, great for providing us with real-time data. Insights is a special word, because I think the data itself is data. I mean, the insight comes when the human looks at it and makes some decisions and ideas and learns from what the data is telling us, okay? But then it says this can help identify bottlenecks, optimize production scheduling, and improve overall efficiency, which is just, I think that's just some buzzwords. Additionally, Internet of Things devices can monitor the performance of machines and alert maintenance staff when problems arise, reducing downtime. So it's some good thoughts there. And I think ChatGPT, it's a great conversation starter or a paper starter, if you like, as academic. But I think here we've done a piece of research in the last couple of years together with Henrik Soby down at Velux, the rooftop window manufacturer in Denmark, where they implemented an Internet of Things system with exactly this in mind. These sensors, Internet of Things, the tablet display will inform the operators of all this useful data and insights, and the OEE will improve. 6 months later, still no improvement, not a drop of improvement. And what we discovered is that actually the technology, okay, it has potential, and this is just what ChatGPT is telling us. But what ChatGPT is not telling us is that we need leaders to become learning facilitators, and we need to engage the operators in discovering problems from the data and actually using that data to understand the problems and discover what is it that we don't know about the process? What is this data really telling us? And I think that's where the insight can be turned into improvement by creating this learning capability within the organization. And I think just one more example then is the artificial intelligence. Here we go. This is ChatGPT. This is artificial intelligence at best. Has the potential to greatly enhance lean processes by automating repetitive and time-consuming tasks. I mean, that's a typical answer we'd give, right? freeing up as academics, freeing up workers to focus on more value-adding activities. What if there are no more value-adding activities? This was the question we addressed before, right? Do we lay off the workers? And I think that's also picked up by ChatGPT. So AI can also harm production flow if it replaces human workers, leading to job losses and potentially causing issues with workforce morale. So I think it's a useful tool, this artificial intelligence chatbot here. But Rachna, you want to join in?
Yeah, I absolutely actually want to share something. So there is a project that got started by a couple of faculty. And the idea was, we all teach supply chain and operations core courses, right? So feed the exam into ChatGPT and see how well it does and where does it do well and sort of, what type of answers does it give. So not surprisingly, quantitative questions such as number of Kanbans, inventory optimization, amount of inventory, all of that, ChatGPT does very well. So students or people who are taking classes, if you're taking exams, those are the questions you want to feed in. Now, the interesting thing where it fails is very simple product flow questions. So you want to kind of show how the product is flowing or a process, and you want to get a sense of one, how do you think the process is doing and where should the improvements come from? Completely fails. I mean, it does not completely, it fails. And so what does it tell us is that very simple things that my undergrad students can do, ChatGPT has an issue with those kind of questions. So if you extend it and say, okay, now I want to optimize or improve a process in real time, in real world, where are you likely to deploy strategies or technologies such as ChatGPT? Quantitative stuff doing very well, logic stuff, it tries to, but it does not do as well. What is another interesting thing is, like, we gave some feedback on it, like, maybe this is where you should start or some suggestions. The second round, it becomes better. And so there is an opportunity that we probably could be using it. Now, we don't understand it. I was talking to the person who's leading the Google artificial intelligence project. Large number of engineers are reporting to this person. And this person said, the scary part is that we do not understand how artificial intelligence helps improve. We do not understand that black box of how the learning is occurring. So going back to our earlier conversation about thinking and learning systems, yes, it can improve the process, but if we cannot show cause and effect, how do we replicate it? And so that might be something that might be an area both of study in terms of academics as well as in terms of practitioners. And I see a ton of questions coming through the chat as well. Giuliano, I don't know if you want to kind of get to some of those questions.
Yes, thank you, Rachna.
Can I make a quick statement about that? That as Daryl was reading the answers of ChatGPT, basically all it does is kind of go to the cloud and pulls data and then creates nice sentences and paragraphs from that. And the answers you're giving me, if you had told me that was from a Internet of Things or Industry 4.0 technology solution provider, it would sound perfect. That's exactly what they would say. And I had a colleague who talked about a billiard ball model, where you hit a billiard ball and it hits another one and hits another one. And I think the way that we think often about these technologies is like that, where the input is the technology, and then it comes out with solutions, optimum solutions, which automatically change what's happening on at the workplace in the shop. And they see it as something predictable and optimizable, and that should go pretty much as planned.
Yeah.
So therefore the technology optimizes. The technology gives you real-time information to schedule. The technology basically tells you what to do because it's all knowing and all seeing. And we know the real world doesn't conform to the assumptions of these models very well.
treats everything as a technical puzzle rather than a complex problem, which it really is. And I think that's the limitation there. Yeah.
I think just to add to that, Torbjorn and I, we run a course together. We call it Leading Intelligent Lean, which takes the sort of human aspects of leading, etc. But we use the term intelligent lean rather than smart or digital or whatever, because what we believe is the best solution is the combination of artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of this type of big data, etc., with human learning, which is actually the human brain and the artificial brain working together. So clearly some of the things that you're talking about, Daryl, you know, with ChatGPT are great, but some are not quite so great. The question is, if we go and ask the same question in 3 years' time, what will the answer be? Will it have learned sufficiently to have really smart answers? Or is it actually still relying on the knowledge that's in the internet, of which some is great and some is pretty average? So if that is the case, then probably it won't learn sufficiently. So I think a really interesting topic to take forward. But for me, you've got to combine the human mind and the artificial mind, and that's going to give the best solution rather than one or the other.
And that's the point I think Manish is making as well as your former colleague at Marodin.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, I put my exams on ChatGPT and got an F, so I'm pretty happy with that. So still cannot do my exam or can pass in my class. So I'm still calm on that sense, but now I'm going to challenge everything Daryl said, because I think he's doing ChatGPT for all his answers. But it can also be used in our favor, right? As David Veach here is saying, that use ChatGPT to make quizzes and assignments, so to make the questions as well that they will answer. So yeah, we're learning how to do that. We have here the answer for the last poll here. Which of the following statements you agree with? Industry 4.0 will complement lean. 66% of people said that. A new production system will emerge from lean and industry 4.0. So that's 30%. Industry 4.0 is only a fad, 3%, sorry. And then industry 4.0 will replace lean, 0%. Well, no one think that. So very interesting. Thank you very much for everybody that answered the polls and has been listening to us. So we're getting close to kind of the final touches here. I cannot read all the comments. Thank you guys, Felipe and Antoinetta, also for your comments there. Just to summarize a few things, and then I'll open to each one of you guys for a couple of minutes there for ending notes. It seems like we're very excited about the technology. There's a lot of potential. There is potential on improvement processes itself, but it's also potential to improve how we improve processes, right? And potential to improve the learning if they're done together, to help us solve more problems or better problems. And it's lean can help understand where to put the technology and how to adapt the technology and how to solve problems, so technology can be more beneficial for the company. So where to improve and how. We need to involve people in that, so never forget about the people side, which is very important, so that those improvements in technologies have to involve people and be mindful of the role and of people in that. If not, it'll just be a wallpaper technology, will not be useful, or companies will spend a lot of time there. There are many opportunities for research. There's a lot of what this might do. There is few of what is actually doing. So there seems to be a lot of research opportunity from, you know, surveys or in-depth case studies that we really understand kind of the trades off of these different technologies, and maybe these technologies are a lot different in the way to impact lean and all that. So these were kind of my summary thoughts here. Now I'm gonna open to each one of you guys for your final comments there. So Daryl, if you wanna start.
Sure. Thanks, Giuliano. Yeah, I think it's It's been really it's been really fun here listening to the responses and joining in here with the questions from the participants as well. Maybe just a concluding remark. It's more of a word of warning, I guess. I think to my frustration, we were visiting. I won't say the name here, but we were visiting a showcase lean industry 4 company last summer. And the company representatives were very impressed to show us the digital value stream mapping, which they had on the screens on the wall, taking a wall to wall of the real-time data coming in from the Internet of Things, the sensors, the inventory which was between, and we could see it in real time. It's fascinating to see how much value creating we were doing. But at the same time, I was caught my attention with the red flashing light down in the shop floor. So it was on the catwalk. These screens are on the catwalk, and we look down onto the machining area. And here stands a woman scratching her head and looking in the machine with the red flashing light. And obviously there's a problem. And she's suffering with the problem, struggling, no wondering what is the reason here. And at the same time, we still continue to look at the next page on the value stream map, and we see some more digital information and data. And by this time, she's called over her colleagues, and they both stood there scratching their head and wondering why the machine is unstopped. And I think great to have the digital tools here showing us some information, but the real data is on the Gemba. I think, and that's my warning to you all: is don't become too engulfed in your digital wallpaper. Go and help the employees solve their problems, tackle the problems, and get the production system running. I think it's only going to appear as a red flag on the screen in real time anyway. But go and help. Chain of help. I think that's my 50 cents.
Thanks, Daryl. Peter, can you follow that?
Yeah, I think, I've enjoyed the discussion. I was put in mind of, I was asking a few questions on LinkedIn, and one guy came back and he said, well, this is how I see it. People first, then the process, then the technology. And I think really we need all three, but that's the order that I would do the thinking in. How are you going to make this work for the people with the right leadership, as Daryl was saying? How are we going to understand the processes, and then how can the technology help? So, avoid the shiny new thing technology push, and get the technology to serve you, like the examples that Jeff has given, for example, would be my thinking. But I agree with you, lots of really ripe opportunities for us in the research area. And maybe the big balloon in this is maybe we all got a bit bored talking about lean for 30 years, and this is something new and interesting to do some research on. So hope you enjoyed the session, everyone.
Thank you. Rachna, if you can follow.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, lean and industry 4.0. So what are sort of the highlights and maybe some opportunities there? So similarities to previous systems. It's not an either or proposition. You need both of them. It is still a socio-technical system, which means that you need both the people part as well as the technical part. And the focus is on the system. It is not pieces. And that is what we talked about in implementing lean many years ago. It is still a thinking and learning orientation system. So without the thinking and without the learning, I don't think we can implement and get value from the technologies that we are using. The focus remains on the value proposition that can be brought in actually from the technologies that we are using. What makes it very different is the speed at which it is coming at us, and the open gaps that Peter was talking about earlier. Is it the context in which it would be different? Because the speed at which it is being implemented in different scenarios is going to be different. So one of the questions online was, what about outsourcing, offshoring from developing and developed countries? I think that is a real challenge and a real opportunity where we can do some interesting research. But I see a lot of commonalities from earlier questions that we were examining in terms of other technologies. So is it really old wine in a new bottle, sort of the new shining object? We might want to kind of think about it carefully from an academic perspective. And this is an unrelated comment. I think someone asked, like, what kind of books are we guys reading? So there are, I'm sure we all read a lot, but there is one that has been very interesting to me recently, and it is called Atomic Habits. And the idea is, how do you change small habits to make big changes in the outcomes that you can achieve? And the same idea that we are talking about small problems leading to larger gains in the long run. So if you're interested, take a look at Atomic Habits. Great book. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, now for your final comments.
So I teach a course called about lean leadership. It's called a master class. And interestingly, we're doing it using virtual reality headsets now. And so we're using, I don't know, maybe that's Industry 4.0 applied to teaching, but it's working quite effectively. But anyway, we have one of our speakers is from AstraZeneca, and they have a chief operating officer who is all in on lean. She calls it a license to operate, and she understands that it includes the way people think, and there's a leadership academy about how to behave and how to solve problems and how to coach others. And so they're getting very much into the soft side of lean and culture. At the same time, she's a big advocate of digitalization. And within lean, they have an investment where they believe they should have 1.5% of the people in mostly manufacturing who are lean people, trained in lean. So they have hundreds of these people, and at the top level too of regions. And then IT has been working on digitalizations, and what you see is that the lean people are on the shop floor and they're solving real problems. They understand the Gemba well, and they understand the problems people face, and they know how to talk to the people on the front line. And the IT people are largely sitting in front of computers and imagining use cases. And that includes use cases for the tools the lean people use, like you mentioned, value stream mapping, but also if they see something on paper, like for daily management, they have whiteboards and they have pieces of paper on it, that's automatically bad. We need to get rid of that. So what they've done at AstraZeneca is they've created a team of top lean people and top IT people for the whole company to lead the digital effort. So it's integrated by these people with these different perspectives. And then you have people on the shop floor who can test out the technologies and understand the shop floor, and the lean people are out there. So they seem to be really doing a good job. At least they have the structure to really integrate this. We can talk about it in the abstract, but they are trying to do it in real life. And they have the strong lean people who really understand lean in its entirety, the whole system. Plus they have strong IT people, and they're collaborating. So, Peter mentioned case studies and longitudinal case studies. That would be the sort of thing that I'm not going to personally do, so I retired from university, but that's the kind of thing that I'd love for somebody to do, is to find these cases where it's real lean, not just artificial tools, and where there's true integration between the lean thinking people and trained people and the IT people, and see if that goes better in some way or another than a company that doesn't have that integration, where the IT people are just throwing the technology over the wall. You expect it to go better, but it'd be nice if there was some evidence for that. And that might even encourage other companies to do that.
Great, thank you.
While we were on the book reviews, actually, Jeff, talking of longitudinal case studies, I recommend this wholeheartedly. It's from my friends at the Theodo Group. learning to scale. So it's kind of lean scale up. It's the learning system, and it's about creating a resilient organization. So the lean versus resilience trade-off, thing of the past. So can't recommend this one enough.
Thanks, Daryl. Let's not forget of Introduction to Manufacturing that Tor just published. Although I didn't receive my version still, Tor, but I'm doing the marketing for you anyway in the expectation that I do receive a copy. So thank you very much to Evelina, the Green Consulting Group, Marcio Machado also for all their comments there, and Nettie as well. Thank you very much for everybody listening, watching it, for the great panelists to accepting this and being with us for this time and giving your answer there. Now I'm gonna go back to Tor for some final comments for you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuliano. Thank you to the whole panel. This was a really interesting 1 hour, 15 minutes. I just want to repeat again, thanks to our sponsors for the POMS College of Operational Excellence, Shingo Institute, and all the other universities and institutions you see on this slide. We have 2 events coming up. The one is the Operational Excellence Mini Conference, which happens just before the POMS conference this year. And for that, you can also submit your best papers, at least if you're a young scholar, and you can enter the competition and perhaps be one of the finalists that will be presented during the mini conference. As always, the College of Operational Excellence is also organizing a track. So please submit your papers. Actually, that's too late, but those of you who have, we will see you all in Orlando in May. So again, thanks to the panel, and have a lovely weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it, Torbjörn. See you in Orlando.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone.
So.
Are we offline?
Now we're offline.